Hello.
Yeah, that's your name.
Squirrels got me.
Big Jim.
Yeah.
Really cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
Cold and fun.
That's good that you think that of it, because that's what deer hunting typically is cold and fun.
Yesterday morning, I'm glassing up on the pass, and I see these deer moving, and I'm like, ooh, there's some deer moving. All of a sudden, I just see this person just head down, just hauling ass, wearing shorts and a t-shirt with a pack on. And I'm like, is that Tard? My dad always talks about floating through the woods like the autumn breeze.
So Robert's
when you're
the
275 pounds, I don't know how you do that, but
the Freightliner. It's just like a creeper. You're just kind of up in the corner watching what's going on down there.
yeah,
You know.
he's like,
he's up there slapping it, pissing all over everything.
is it warm yet?
How did you know the name of the actor?
That's right. I know.
Why did you say his name?
Hervé Villechaize.
You know what Pertnear means.
If you know what Pertnear means and you live in America, you're a redneck too.
Welcome to the Log Talk Podcast, brought to you by Pertnear Outdoors. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode with us here at Pertnear Outdoors, and this is going to be episode 44. So this week we are going to be sitting down with a special guest, somebody who I think is about to blow up and become a household name. He's been seen on some stuff and listened to on some stuff with Exodus on Trail Cam Radio, and he was just featured as on one of their Whitetail Cribs episodes. And I know there's a couple other guys out there who have sat down to do podcasts with him that will be coming out shortly. And this is Steve Sherk. So Steve is a guy that we came across that we'll talk about kind of how we came across him, but it was ultimately through Exodus and their podcast, Trail Cam Radio. And when Dallas turned me on to Steve, I started looking at what he was doing, where he was doing it, and what he was, not only the success he was having, but the quality of the deer that he was on. And a couple weeks ago, about halfway through May, saw him put a post out that he was doing some workshops and some scouting workshops with his guide service, which is himself. And Dallas and I jumped on that opportunity. So this is going to be a recap podcast, kind of getting to know Steve a little bit. You know, we got to spend 4 hours with him, talking nonstop, being able to pick his brain on different things. But this conversation is just kind of going to be an introduction to Steve, to our community and our listeners, and then kind of get into a few of the topics that are pertinent right now, things that you can put to work right now as we speak, as you get ready for this upcoming hunting season. And we'll plan to kind of keep the dialogue going with Steve as we get closer to the fall and start focusing a little more on hunting tactics, not so much trying to drink everything out of the fire hose right now. So we're going to talk a little bit about Steve's guide service, some of his history, his family, as well as the area, how the quality of deer there came to be. And then we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about his scouting, and that was what our focus was of our workshop. So what he's looking for, what type of terrain he's in, things like that. And that's where it hit home so much for me, because I was able to see what he's seeing from his lens. And he was actually, very kind in what he showed us and took us right into some of his best spots on some of the most, the deer that he's working on right now, that you can follow along on Instagram and see pictures of. So it was really, really informative to put boots on the ground and see what Steve is doing and what he's seeing and get his opinion on things. So we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about that, going everywhere from, buck bedding to signpost rubs, scrapes, mock scrapes, trail camera setups, things like that. So I think you'll enjoy this. Steve is a 100% public land hunter, so he's getting it done in areas with high pressure, and and a lot of other people, anybody can come in on him at any time, and he's continuously getting it done year after year. And PA is a one buck state, so unlike us here in New York, once he gets his buck there, he's done. But he's also spends a lot of his time, obviously, as a guide, with people down there throughout the season that he's putting on these deer and trying to get them a buck of a lifetime. So cool stuff. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you head over and follow him on Facebook or Instagram, either or. A lot of the same stuff there. He also has a website, sherksguideservice.com. Check him out there, and definitely follow along with this guy. He's a good one. He's actually out there doing it, seeing it for himself, and somebody that we all can learn from. And he's an open book, so don't hesitate to reach out to him directly. It sounds like Instagram is probably the easiest way to get in touch with him. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. And I would highly encourage anybody listening to this that if you live within, within driving range and you're looking for a way to take your deer hunting to the next level, take the time, take a half a day and go down there and spend it with Steve and, learn a little bit about what he's seeing, because I know it helped me a lot. And I'm very excited to put what I learned to work. And I already did that this past week. I went up to camp in an area that I've talked about on this podcast that I think I'm starting to figure out, or at least kind of having an aha moment about where some of these deer might be and how they may be using it. I went up in there this past Friday and set some cameras up, put 4 cameras in a very small area, a couple on beds and one on a mock scrape I made, and then another one just on a good deer trail on the side hill, and already getting cell phone pictures of a buck. And just the day after I was in there, spreading scent all over the place. So I'm really excited to see what this summer brings and what I'm going to see on those cameras, and hopefully can put that all to work to put a good one on the ground this upcoming fall. So that's that. Enjoy the episode. Enjoy the conversation. Give them a follow. Quick update on us and what we've got going on. I'm pretty fired up. Got our stickers in. Got a new batch of stickers. Some stuff that we have not had yet. So some new things for everybody there. So you can reach out directly to us. In the meantime, if you hear this and you want some stickers, just reach out directly to us on Instagram, Facebook, or shoot us a text, whatever, phone call, and do that. But we'll be getting that stuff up on the website soon. So Danny's got the store kind of in the works on the back end, and our hats got notified last week that our hats were shipped. So we should have them this week, and we're going to get them out there as soon as we can. Really excited to put that stuff out. And hope you all like it. We definitely hemmed and hawed over it enough. So hopefully it's stuff that you guys will all like. So thank you so much for the continued support. And keep fading them. Have a good week, everybody. There you are.
I think we're good now.
How are you?
I'm all right. How about you guys?
Good. Dallas, I
Is
assume.
it clear enough? I'm looking a little blurry here, but maybe it's as good as it's going to get.
No, you're okay. I can see you good.
All right.
See you as good as we want to see you. I mean, any clearer, I'd be uncomfortable. Are those wild animals at your house, Dallas? I hear some screaming.
You do?
I'm not screaming,
Hey.
but I can hear them.
I'm as isolated as I can get here.
I know.
I don't have shit for volume though.
Can't
I
hear
got my
nothing.
got my volume turned all the way up, but I can't hear much.
Okay. We'll yell at you. Trying to make the best of this, doing all this stuff remotely. Can only do so much.
Sure. No problem.
All right. So I guess we'll just get rolling with the conversation. So, Steve, thank you for jumping on. So this week we are going to have a big woods mountain buck conversation. And Steve is somebody that kind of came onto my radar that Dallas stumbled across. I think you're listening to some podcasts with Trail Cam Radio with Exodus, I think is where Dallas heard of you, Steve. So it was probably about a month and a half ago that Dallas told me about you, and I looked you up on Instagram and immediately was blown away by the quality of the deer that you're on down just about an hour and a half south of us down in northwest Pennsylvania. So, we were so intrigued that you posted that you were doing had scouting workshops available. So Dallas and I quickly reached out and organized something with you. So this podcast is going to be primarily, getting to let everybody get to know who you are and what you're all about, what you're doing with your guide service, and also, kind of review what we did last week when we were able to get together. We had about 4 hours, so we didn't want to spend too much time, sitting in front of microphones. We wanted to actually be
Sure.
out in the woods hitting the trails. So I guess without continuing to ramble on, I'll just introduce you and just kind of run us down, who you are, where you're from, and maybe a little bit of your background with hunting and the outdoors.
Sure. So I'm Steve Sherk, and I grew up just outside of Bradford, Pennsylvania, right in the middle of the Allegheny National Forest, and pretty much as early in my days as I can remember, I've just been extremely passionate with hunting, especially white-tailed deer. And um, I started out my main career in my early 20s was I was started a landscaping business, and I'm still doing that. But about 7 years ago now, roughly, because landscaping slows down in the fall, I started up a guide service called Sherks Guide Service, and so I've been doing that like the past 7 years, and along with the landscaping, and it's been going really well. It's creating more situations like this, leading me to great guys like you and meeting so many great people.
Stop. That's so nice of you to say that.
But no, it's just another way for me to expose my passion a little bit more for whitetails. And there's people from all over the country coming here to Pennsylvania. We're hunting all public land. I think a lot of people are surprised that there's some really big deer here, and just goes to show that the big woods might not always be the place where you think you're going to go to shoot big bucks. But I think more and more people are finding out that, especially here in Pennsylvania, we got some really big bucks in this public land, big woods environment we have. So that's pretty much how things are right now. And just like I said, I'm looking forward to talking with you guys today, and I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah. So why don't we get into a little bit of kind of the history of, some of us, especially New Yorkers, we are starting to see the big bucks that you guys are putting on the ground down there and that you're seeing on a consistent basis in PA. So I know on the last episode you were on with Exodus, you were talking about kind of the history of the APRs, the antler point restrictions that Pennsylvania put in. And, I know your belief is that was a pretty big turning point for Pennsylvania and their deer herd and how things were. So you want to talk a little bit about that, about what they did in PA back in the early 2000s?
Yeah, I think it was 2002, I believe, when the antler restriction started. And I mean, 100-inch deer before them was you could almost call them a giant here in Pennsylvania. 100-inch deer, which, not that it's a bad deer now, but I'm just saying 100-incher was just, that was kind of like the wall hanger, or if you can get a 100-incher, you shot a really good deer. And right up until then, that was pretty much all we were seeing. Occasionally you'd hear or see of a real big buck, but they were few and far between. And then they started that antler restriction, and it only took like a year or two, and it's like, holy cow, look at the difference already. And we were told that it would probably be 5 or 10 years before we really saw the effects of it. And that, at least for where we were hunting, it was just amazing how fast it took off, and the amount of quality better deer, better bucks was dramatically increasing. And it seems like year to year it's just getting better and better. And they also gave out a ton of antlerless permits. So the deer herd might not be where it used to be numbers wise, but the deer are bigger now, they're healthier. It's a much better quality environment for the deer here. And like I said, it's just what we have now, basically due to the antler restrictions. It's just been a night and day difference to what we used to hunt. And I think we're all becoming trophy hunters. And one of the maybe sad things about it is we lost a lot of hunters due to that, because people were used to seeing 30, 40, 50 deer a day. You probably wouldn't even see a buck out of that 30 to 50 deer. But that was the kind of action that a lot of Pennsylvania hunters were used to seeing, and that's what kind of kept them in the woods and hunting every year. So we lost a lot of those guys, but I mean, I was totally willing to take the change and see a few less deer to now encounter, giant bucks everywhere. So I'm not saying it's like Iowa or other places or Illinois, but a 120 to 140 class buck now here is like, I mean, just seems like they're everywhere. So
Yeah.
I would totally agree that if you're a state that hasn't had an antler restriction and they were considering it, if you're into bigger deer and want to see better type of hunting in that situation, then I would say antler restriction is something you'd really want to see in your state or the area you're hunting.
Right. And I think a lot of it comes down to education too, because, I think if you're not understanding that the importance of, herd balance and the stability that comes with that, where if you've got too many mouths to feed, you just can't have the nutrition for the health of the herd.
Absolutely.
I think it's important, like all different levels of conversation. I think education is so important because hunters can easily, the older generation or people that just have this perception of, I want to go out to somewhere and see 20 or 30 deer in a day, that may not be a great telltale about what the health is of your property and the area you're hunting. So, it's definitely getting down in your neck of the woods. We have some vast wooded areas here, but nothing like what you guys have down there.
Sure, what you got to see recently.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. I like the history of that, and I know me personally, and Dallas can probably speak to this too. Is I've been hunting down in PA with those guys for maybe 4 years now. I think it's been 4 years, and I've seen a progression, especially the last 2 years. The quality of deer that we're seeing over in Potter County, it's almost like, wow, like there's some big bucks here in the sign. there's bigger sign there than we're seeing back home here. So
it's a different world, I bet.
It is. A lot of it has to do with with the clear cuts, and a lot of things revolve around that. And that's something we'll get into here in talking about. But, on that, Dallas, you got any, thoughts or things that you've seen because you've been hunting down there for almost 20 years, right?
Yeah. The first time we went to Potter County, I think it was 2000 or 01, and it was still the old Orange Army days there, where actually we didn't see a lot of deer in that area, but I see some spots for sure. But the key, like you said, is it's actually the herd health. I mean, the deer were unhealthy. I remember the first time I went down to actually the Allegheny in '96, and we seen some deer that were they were smaller than my dog, and there was a lot of deer and a lot of hunters and a lot of just, I shot on that trip a basket rack 8-pointer, and it drew quite a bit of attention. People at camp were pretty excited about that, and then in '04, with only a couple of years between going to Potter County, we went down in '04 and we saw an immediate difference. Then we saw, a group of 6 guys hunting 3 days in a place that we were not familiar with, had very little history with. And we saw 3 good bucks, like in that 100 to 110 inch range, which, as you said, in those times was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But it was nothing special, but we had already noticed a difference. It's gotten better in 6 or 8 years when, I've seen some pretty impressive stuff. And also we've had some sightings, and we've brought out some deer that we're actually pretty happy with. So, I mean, it definitely, I know, as you said, there was a trade-off as far as what a lot of people thought about it, but I think you could really justify it, honestly, by the health of the deer. I mean, I know that part of what happened before was just the browse was just, because that's what they're living on in a lot of cases, just browse.
Yep.
And they had the understory just cut right down where there was nothing left, where it just wasn't a good situation for the deer herd. So from our standpoint, people who are still hunting down there benefited from it. But I honestly think that anybody that's got any experience with this sort of thing can tell that it was definitely the right move. It was the right thing to do. I think we're into it so far now that I can't see anything really changing.
One thing I'd like to add to that also is I know a lot of people years ago, like they'd enjoy seeing deer in their yards and they'd be getting in their gardens, and maybe that wasn't a good thing, but people just used to see a lot more deer in their yards, and now they say, well, there's no deer anymore because I don't see them in my yards. Well, that's not the case. The deer are in the woods because now there's food in the woods, and deer aren't just scrounging around everyone's property to find any morsel of food because they were competing with so many other deer. And we've given the woods a chance to make a better habitat for them. So I think that you hit on a really
Yeah, they're
good
not starving
point.
anymore.
Absolutely. So if you're someone that it's driving around the roads or looking in people's yards and those kind of places and using that as a tool to determine if we still have deer, or it's just not that way anymore. The deer are in the woods because that's where they truly want to be.
Right. That's a really interesting point. I've never heard. It's a great
Yep.
point.
Yep.
So I think what I kind of want to do with this, like Dallas and I were talking, and we spent 4 hours together, and I don't think there was more than 30 seconds without words going back and forth. Like we were all out of breath by the time we were done hanging out. So I don't want to try to eat the whole elephant today. There's a lot of stuff that we talked about and a lot of things that I want to talk to you about that is really like hunting season, like go at 'em tactics related, that I don't really want to try to delve too far into today. I think I want to kind of have like a seasonal discussion really based around what we were out trying to learn with you last week. And then we'll get together again, maybe in August or sometime early September, just to get everybody's minds rocking and rolling from what they saw this summer to get ready for deer season. So,
Great.
So I'll kind of just want to have an open dialogue, and Dallas, I'll let you talk quite a bit here too. So last week we come down there, you put out on Instagram that you were, open and you were doing workshops, private parties, if anybody wanted to come down. So, I'm like, what the hell? I've never done anything like this before. I'd love to see the woods in someone else's eyes, in the area that you're at. It can relate to some of the stuff we have here in New York and some of the stuff that we hunt in PA. So we were very excited to come down and come with you on this experience that neither one of us have ever had, going with a guide or an outfitter to show us, or even take us out. Everything we've ever done has been on our own. So we just know what we know. So I guess kind of talk a little bit about what your approach is with these workshops, and then we'll kind of, just go from there with the conversation.
Well, my approach is like, I kind of, I'm showing people what I look for. You guys got to see some of my setups. And I like to ask specific questions. Everyone has their own theories or things they're trying to learn, and I try to get specific into everyone's mind. And I think I kept asking you guys, is there anything specific, or that it's so much easier when you have people out there in the woods to show them something than explain it when you can actually point it out. So like I said, I just show people the habitat to look for. I showed you guys buck bedding and big woods buck bedding, and where we put our cameras, where we put our stands, and that's pretty much it. But a lot of it too is just the amount of talking you do the whole time. It's almost like you're in a classroom, but we're in the woods. So, and it varies from person to person how it goes, or what they like to learn. And if somebody just had one specific thing they wanted to learn, and they wanted to come up here and me to try to explain it to them in a better way, I'd be for that. So it's not like the workshops are a set agenda, or I only do it one certain way. I try to, whether there's one person or a group of people, I try to prepare myself ahead of time for what they're here to learn and see, and then I go from there.
Yeah, it was cool with you asking us ahead of time, what do you want out of this? And so that's what you gave us. And at one point you're like, so am I showing you enough? You feel like you're getting your money's worth? And I'm like, maybe like only $70 worth right now. You gotta do a little more. Yeah. It was like 95 degrees out. We're on a side hill hiking around. But so, and then one of the things I wanted, Dallas and I were talking about this on the way home. We were talking about on the way there, really not sure. We're like, I wonder how this guy does this, because, what's he going to show us? And I want to just identify that quickly because there are some people that are listening that may be new hunters or might have never been in a situation like this. Is kind of a respect level that you need to have when you're just in hunting in general. You know, if somebody takes you to a spot or shows you something,
Yep.
it's a sportsman-like thing. It's the respectful thing to do. That is that person's area. You know, and that can be a tough thing. It's public land. But if somebody has the confidence or the trust in you to take you in and show you, like you did, the spots that these are the bucks that you're actively hunting right now, that we're watching pictures of these deer on Instagram, like that's a lot. You're putting a lot of trust in the client or the person that's coming with you. And not everybody out there maybe was either raised that way or maybe even understands that that's an ethic in hunting or fishing, that if somebody takes you to a spot and says, this is my favorite spot or a spot I'm actively hunting, you got to kind of understand the unwritten rules there, that it's like, you don't show up there on a weekday when so-and-so's working and go after their hard-earned stuff that they're working on. So I know I've experienced that. I told you a story about our hunt out in Colorado where some guys put us on deer that hunt that area every single year. They live right there. And it's, we still don't tell anybody exactly where that was out of respect for those guys who live there and hunt that all the time. So just something I wanted to identify, and we both thank you for being an open book and showing us and having that trust in us, but something we certainly want to identify on here too. So
Sure. No, and that's I'm glad you brought this up, because it's not like something I tell people, hey, if I'm going to show you, you're never allowed to go here. Like, I don't have the right to say something like that. But then again, like, we all know as hunters how we're supposed to act, and that's just, to me, it's part of being ethical. Like, hey, the guy's put his time in here, and this is where he hunts, and we're just going there to maybe see what he's doing and the kind of area that he's hunting, and then we can use that somewhere else. Like, I would hope that that's what everyone would want to do. Unfortunately, I'm sure there's probably a few people out there that would try to take advantage of that, but I definitely know you guys aren't like that, and I'm thankful for that, obviously. But like I said, I'm just glad you brought that up, and I hope that anyone that would ever come with me would be just like you guys.
appreciate it.
I think the key there too is that you're not dealing, we thought maybe there was like one area that you took everybody and kind of showed them that the way one place sets up, but that'd be kind of dealing in hypotheticals as far as, oh, here's what you can look for, and here's an example of something. But what we were doing was actually looking for, from the scouting point of view, what I wanted to see was, where do these big mature mountain bucks live? Show me an example of how they bed, how they act, where they feed. And you were able to take us right to spots where there's definitely giant, mature, big woods bucks living. You know where their bed is, you know where their trails, their scrapes are, you know where they're feeding. So it was cool to actually see a real life example of that.
Great.
So let's get into that. Was the number one thing that we wanted to see. And you talk a lot about, buck bedding has become a very hot topic, and everybody is talking about, hunting buck beds or getting in on them close. And hearing you talk about your theory on that, I think you're on to the buck beds, but your theory on how you're using that information is a little bit different. So let's kind of talk a little bit about that. This time of year, you've already identified where a lot of these deer are living, but if you're somebody who's wanting to go out and find spots right now, what's your theory on where bucks are bedding and where they concentrate, especially mature bucks?
Well, one thing I will say is right now, where they're at right now may not be where they're at in the fall. They're, a lot of them are batched up with other bucks. So, but you can still, it's one of those things too, like through experience, even if I find a big impression in the ground that was a bed and I don't even see any hair in it, but just from experience, I usually have a pretty good idea of what a buck bed is, just because after you see so many, you can just tell what they like. But it's one of those things you just kind of have to see it. But if you scout the right times of the year, like one of my favorite times to scout is like right after gun season. Um, it's a great time to go in, and a lot of the bedding sign and so forth is a lot more visible then. So there's just different times of year I would recommend if you really want to key in, on specific bucks or learn an area. I wouldn't say summertime would be the best time to do that, but if you got the time, like more what they call postseason, that's when I really start focusing in on trying to get to know a particular deer, and just like I said, it's just a lot more evident and easier to pick up on. But for me, because I've done it so much now, like I still have a pretty decent idea, even if I was to go out there now and see some of those things. But for a beginner, I think this time of year wouldn't be right. But like I said, it's I think what's the most important key for me about betting is that's where I know he's at in the daytime. You see a lot of sign in certain areas, and obviously a lot of buck signs made at night. But when you can locate beds, like that's like one of the biggest keys, because there's where he's at in the day. Now it's just a matter of finding out the right way to set up. And I think I told you guys in the mountains, and you probably noticed I don't normally like to set up real close due to wind shifts. But as far as me, I wouldn't call myself the guy that sets right up on beds or maybe the bedroom hunter, but I still consider myself, like hunting the fringes of those areas.
Mm-hmm. The what I took from you, and I've heard you say it before, is, and what was consistent with where all you found all these buck beds we went to, is you look a lot at elevation, you look
Yep.
a lot at cover, and you look a lot at food. So
Yep.
kind of explain that, because each one of those spots we went to, there were actively deer bedding in those spots, whether it is one of the bucks you don't know at this point. Maybe in a few months you will, or a month or so, once the horns really get developed. But
Right.
you're looking at certain elevation levels and up, and then certain topography types, and as well as cover. So I guess kind of talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, like cover and elevation to me are kind of like equal. Like I can't say one is more important than the other. Like these bucks here, especially the mature ones, you gotta usually have both. So I'm up high in some kind of cover. You probably saw I'm not always in like the nastiest, thickest cover either. I think that's where some people have overlooked. They think every buck lives in the most thickest, densest spot that every area has, and that's not the case at all. Like almost every buck bed I find, they can usually see 20 to 50 yards like around them. So their visibility is really important. And then as far as food though, I can't say like I'll find a food source and then I try to find bedding. Like I always try to find bedding, and then sometimes if there's no food around, I really don't worry about it, because I've seen where bucks will travel a mile or more to some of their main feeding areas, depending on what's available for them. So no, you kind of hit it right. I'm in higher elevations and always in cover, and then when I really want to like find buck beds, I'm always near elevation drops. And I know a lot of people think they bed in those spots because it's based on thermals, which I do think that's somewhat the case. But where there's drops in elevation, they can also they can get away a lot faster. It's one of those things, you bump them and then 2 steps they're down over the hill. They can really escape and get away from predators and hunters a lot faster. And then also, for the most part, I mean, I like to. I remember I showed you like on the edges of the bedding area, some of the signpost rubs and that. Like that's another thing. Like on the edge of an older cutter, I'll usually walk around the whole perimeter looking for some big rubs. Like that's kind of like us owning a property and like putting posted signs up. Like that's what those rubs truly mean. That I don't think a lot of people realize that. But I always find more rubs on the edge of the bedding area than I do on the inside. So that's just, I mean, I could talk all day too about bedding as well, but those are kind of like some of the key things I focus on. It's most importantly the cover, the elevation. I start to dial in more on where elevation changes are, and then I use sign a little bit, but not always.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned the signpost rub, and we were going to bring this up at some point, but that's a term that gets used a lot and I think misused. You
Mhm.
know, you showed us a true signpost rub. If you want to go into a little bit more detail about exactly what that looks like and what the purpose of it is, because I thought your take on that was pretty interesting.
Sure. Well, a lot of the signpost rubs I find are on the edges of what I call like either their bedding area or core area. It's not always like on a travel route or, sometimes it's in there. I mean, they can be out there for different reasons, but almost every big buck will have some signpost rubs kind of on the edge of his bedding area. And they're a lot easier to find like during hunting season when they're fresh, but right now we could have probably easily walked right by that one that I showed you guys, but they're they're usually in spots too, like you can't hardly miss them. If it would have been in the fall, you would have seen it, no doubt, because it would have been freshly rubbed. But they put
Yeah.
them in spots too, to like, if you were going to put a posted sign up, you would want to make sure everyone saw it. And that's,
Yeah.
like there a lot of times they're in like little clearings, or and sometimes too I'll find like, people talk about one signpost rub, but then you'll find like in an opening we have like what's called sumac here, and you get on the edge of a bedding area, and if there's like a bunch of sumac trees, like you'll see like 15 of them just shredded up. That's another point, like it's usually like on an edge, and what I've learned is I truly believe that those are really into like territorial markings and marking their territory rather than some testosterone filled buck just coming through and blowing all his energy out on those trees. They're there to really show like, hey, this is my spot. And you generally, once you start going inside the cover, then it's like, wow, there's hardly any sign because they're putting those rubs where they can be seen.
So when you see that, like what's that telling you? Is that an area that you want to focus on, or you're going to try to dive in, around the edges of that to try to maybe find out where they're bedding,
Mm-hmm.
figure out where your stand setups are? You showed us where you had two different stand setups in that area and where you found two different beds.
Yep.
So us knowing kind of that there, if you're us or someone else who's out there scouting and you find, I mean, these rubs you cannot mistake. That
Yep.
rub was unbelievable. And then there was another tree 4 yards away from it that was
Yep.
freaking raked too. And these are not like, these are big buck rubs. I mean, I've seen big buck rubs before. These are big. These look like elk rubs. I mean, it's insane how high they were too. But what's that telling you? Like, when you see that, what are you going to do to zero in on it?
Well, then I'm gonna try to outline the like what cover is there. I'll walk the whole perimeter of the cover, get an idea of how it flows through the area, and then I'll probably dive in there, not during the season but after the season, and I'll start checking on the edge of those elevation drops, looking for beds. And then if I can get inside of that cover a little bit closer, I will, but just depends on the size of the area, because like I told you, I rarely like to get less than 100 yards. You probably remember I showed you last year how I tried to get like right on top of those beds, and due to the swirling mountain wind, it only made my hunt for that buck worse. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to find a spot maybe like around a couple 100 yards away to set up rather than right on top of them. If I had consistent wind, I would certainly get as close as possible, but it seems to be too tough in the mountains. But yeah, like I said, the signpost rub on the edges of those or of thickets, like that's one of the greatest telltale signs that you found the core area of a buck. But another key point about those rubs is those rubs have probably been there like, at least as far as I know, 10 years, and it hasn't always been the same buck. there's always in that particular clear cut, there's always one dominant buck that owns that. And remember, I also told you before that a year before that there was a really mature 8-point in there, and then this past year that buck, that 12-point, took over. Not only did he take over the cover, but he took over the beds. So when you find buck bedding, you might think, well, that was this particular buck, but a buck will, or other bucks through time, when however they figure out who's the most dominant deer through fighting or whatever, those beds will be occupied almost every year by the most dominant buck in every area or in that area. So that's something like really fascinating that I've learned over the years, is how, mature, more dominant buck in every area, he always gets the best of the best. He will get the best bedding spots. He will get the most does. He's going to be feeding where the most prime food source is. So just goes to show the role of the dominant buck is pretty incredible.
Got anything else on that, Dallas?
Yeah, well, Steve mentioned the wind and the thermals, and I think that's a good segue to get into kind of the way that you, both your theory on, or lack thereof, of the way that bucks use the wind to bed and the way that you use it to hunt. It seems to go more towards like, from what I understand, you're not as concerned about the wind direction as far as whether a buck is going to be in a spot, but you're using it more for your own access and hunting.
Yeah.
So you don't totally buy into bucks use a certain area to bed on a certain wind. Absolutely. As far as wind-based bedding. They're more, they've got these spots in the cover where they can go back to.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of the way I understood it?
Yep, and that's what a lot of people might even disagree, or they're being taught wrong. And I'm not saying there's bucks that don't do that, but more in my area, due to inconsistent wind, they just can't do that. Wind might be changing every 5 minutes. So you're telling me that he goes into an area and just thinks, well, it's blowing out of the west, so I'm going to go bed here. But then 5 minutes later, it blows out of the east or whatever. I mean, he'd never get a chance to lay down. So they've just come accustomed to wind inconsistencies, and the same thing with thermals. And it's more here they're using cover and a visual spot to make sure that they can also see anything approaching them.
Yeah, and just thinking back to those beds that we saw with you, almost all except for that first spot you took us to, that buck had that series of beds along that kind of, there was a big flat that had been clear cut maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago. So there was decent sized trees in there, but pretty thick stem count, a lot of trees. He had some cover to his back, but he could see a long way. It Absolutely. Dropped right off right in front of him. And he had a series of beds that you showed us with a scrape line behind those beds. And then, you pointed out that typically there's does bedded behind him on that flat ridge. So it was interesting seeing the other beds, that was kind of out of the ordinary. The other beds all had super thick cover to the back, but had visibility to the front.
Sure.
So that kind of falls
that's probably like not to interrupt you, but that's like more of a classic buck bed. But I think that was just more coincidence. Like, I'll bet you 50% of them I see are more in relation to the first one that we saw. Like, they're not always right up against cover. Like, a lot of them, and I think what some of them do maybe is the wind shifting, is they might turn around, face a different way. But how they can see in their bed is just as important, if not the most important thing. And one thing too I should bring up is, remember I told you guys that you can be confused because when a buck leaves an area due to different conditions, whether it's the rut or there's better maybe winter food sources or almost anything, but bucks will shift out of areas through different parts of the year. But does will also use those beds and those bedding areas when the bucks really aren't there. But I mainly just from scouting, especially in hunting season, I've learned that especially, from seems like from about mid-September to November, that's when those really prime bedding areas are being used the most. And sometimes too, after gun season, they'll go back into there because it's kind of a time when they've been pressured and they want to be in their most, I guess, safe spots. But people just, I think, can get confused and think I'm only seeing doe beds, like these cluster beds, and it's no good. But it's not always the case. The deer are sharing some of these beds at different times of the year.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a perfect segue into the discussion, which I had never had it explained to me and never really thought about it. But you talking about how the buck's taking over those best bedding spots, best bedding areas, and pushing the does out. And you had shown us a couple different spots, and one in particular where you've had, clients have great success on rut hunts because the does are bedding over here and the buck is bedding up here, which you took us to that doe bedding area. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, this is a perfect area for a buck to bed. But that wasn't where he was bedding. You showed us where he was bedding, and that was actually maybe a better bedding area with better food source and cover. But so you would think does there. So kind of what's your thoughts on that? And then you talked about tracks when we were walking that trail. You talked about tracks in the road when you're seeing them. So talk a little bit about that too. But
okay. Well, first about the bedding is like what I've learned is, like I said before, the bucks get like the best bedding spots, or the more mature bucks especially. And I don't know for sure if it's they push the does out or if it's more that if does do bed near the bucks, I think that they get messed around with too much before the rut. Like they want to be left alone. So they're usually more on the fringes of the cover. A lot of times they're either bedded right on the edge or out the ridge further, a little more open. Just like that kind of came to a point, that ridge, and like a nice open point. And, that's the does just taking advantage of it. And one key thing I'll bring on about that is doe bedding areas in the rut are like maybe the most ultimate spot to set up on. And like you can get away with a lot more in a doe bedding area in the rut than you would in a buck bedding area, just for the fact that your does, I've learned, don't usually come in till like 8, 9, 10 o'clock. And a lot of times there's bucks checking those beds out even before the does come in. And if you even bump does out, other bucks in the surrounding area, they're coming through because they don't know that the does have been bumped. So you can literally set right up on top of doe bedding, and even if you bump them, it's really not that big of a deal. Now, if you bump them 3-4 days in a row, obviously then that's a different situation. But yeah, that's one of my favorite setups, is to get right in the middle of doe bedding in the rut and just wait it out, because the bucks, they have those does pattern as good, if not better than us. So all the mature bucks by then are learning those things. It's almost like they're scouting, except we're scouting to harvest the animal. They're just scouting to figure out where the does are and what they're doing. So it's definitely really important to get to know what all the deer are doing in a specific area, not just when it's hunting season and I'm just going to focus on bucks, because once late October, early November comes, whatever he did before is a lot of times out of the window. Once he gets his mind on does, he's a completely different animal. And then second, how I was talking to you about tracks, is I've learned that the tracks in an area, you'll see now, you're going to see a lot of different sizes. You're going to see doe tracks, buck tracks. Everything's like mixed up this time of year. But then in that particular spot, in that clear cut, all of a sudden I'll notice where I'm hardly seeing any doe tracks, and there's usually just like 1 or 2 big buck tracks. And that's usually about like mid-September or maybe a little earlier, right after they shed their velvet. That area goes completely it's a completely different world, because now bucks are more in isolation mode. The does are staying further and further away because they don't want to be bothered with. And I just think that's a pretty cool thing, how you can pick up on that shift just by watching what kind of tracks you're seeing.
Yeah, I and that's what I loved about going on that walk with you, is you're just seeing different things from someone else's lens. And so somebody might be listening to this and saying, I know how the deer behave on my property and I know what they're doing. But it's like thinking about those different things from those different angles, and every property I've ever hunted, there always seems to be a shift and never really understanding why. So like just that little conversation with you kind of got my mind turning, to our family property or some of the public land I've hunted, where on October 1st, the deer are here and you get to end of October and the deer are nowhere to be seen. Well, it's because I'm still hunting the same spots I was seeing them in early October. When what's different come later in the month, you got bucks all over the place moving around. Those does don't want to be hassled and pushed around unless they want to be. So they're in different spots at that time. So just definitely.
I'll talk a little bit about shifting if you don't mind. But what I've learned, like with a lot of hunters, is there's like hunters that are good in October or late October. There's guys that are really good in November or gun season. And what I think it relates to is the areas they hunt are good just for that particular shift. And they don't pick up on that maybe the deer aren't there or they're doing different things. And they tend to start to focus on that particular week, too, or time of the year to hunt their area, because that's when it's always good. But if you're paying more attention to these shifts and how they occur and what makes them happen, I think you're going to be a better like full season deer hunter where I know I'm got to be real close to buck bedding through most of October, then late October into November I got to be more around doe feeding or bedding. Like you got to kind of be ahead of the game and expect those things to happen. I think a lot of people haven't really done that. And I'd say honestly about every 2 or 3 months, even throughout different times of the year, there's always shifting going on. There's food sources changing, cover changing, hunting pressure. There's so many different things that can cause deer to shift. And they don't think twice when it's time to move. They're going to move.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dallas. You're going to say something.
Yeah. Well, as far as like it goes back right to the beginning with the scouting, but also the shift and everything. Where we grew up hunting in farm country, if you see that deer shift, I mean, you can make some assumptions on food and cover just by looking. I mean, you can drive down the road at night and see a deer eating in a soybean field in August, July and August, they're just pounding soybeans like their life depends on it. But, October 1st comes and they start to turn and they're not there anymore.
Yep.
So these things are more, you could see them more easily out in the open, and even in places that are loaded with acorns or other hard mast or say apples. That these things are seasonal, and with a little bit of experience, when the deer are going to be in those type of areas.
Yeah.
But in the big woods, those things are a lot harder to see. And one thing that I noticed right away, and we more or less picked up on this by asking you, but we kind of said, hey, where's all the oak trees here? Where's all the acorns? Because where we hunt in Potter and all the big woods that we've hunted before have been just loaded with acorns. So we know that that's a primary food source for the deer. But you made the point that, not to say that all the areas you're hunting are like this, but a couple of the places where we saw those core areas for those mature bucks, there was not as much hard mast there. And for me, if I come in on my own trying to scout and I start looking around and I don't see any oak trees, I got to tell you, in the past, I'd say, well, I see a few buck rubs here, and obviously there's good cover and there's good browse, but that's everywhere in the Allegheny National Forest.
Yep. But
I would actually, unless I seen something significant, like maybe if I had found that signpost rub, I might have crossed the area right off my list, just because I might just say, like, look, there's no obvious food sources here.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's kind of 2 points there, but for one thing, it's like you can't just, there's a lot more that goes into it in this type of terrain and cover than there is just looking at, like, driving down a road and saying there's alfalfa there's soybeans here, there's apple trees here. There's a lot more nuance to it. And I mean, obviously a lot of what you've learned is from experience, but you picked up on some pretty interesting things that, and that was the main reason why I wanted to go and put boots on the ground with you, is because these are things that I've noticed over the years of hunting in Pennsylvania that we make these observations, but we only spend a handful of days there every year. So it's like we walk away with all these questions like, man, what are those deer eating? And for example, like I at some point talk about the way they're scratching in the ground and what they're digging for that almost looks like turkey scratchings. It's just a whole different.
Yep.
I think in some cases too, like what you're saying too, I think is the mature bucks like to be isolated. So sitting in a bedding around an oak flat and eating in an oak flat every night is probably going to bring them across a lot more deer than they might even want to deal with.
Sure.
Especially in September, early October.
Yep.
I think they'd rather be in an area in some cases where they can just be isolated, where there's not a ton of deer overrun in there, all working on the same food source. So I know I made a lot of points there, but
no, yeah, good.
It's just along with things that you've been talking about.
Sure. And I'll add to it that deer in any area, or they're browsers, like they feed on hundreds, if not thousands of different things. They eat what's available. I know when there was serious lockdown here because of Corona, when I was going to the grocery store and the shelves were kind of empty, I was just taking whatever was there.
You're browsing on all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's like, hey, whatever's available, I'm just throwing it in the cart. But deer are no different. But if you have like a really good acorn crop, or nice fresh young clear cut, or any kind of mast, or you can even bring up food plots and ag ground. But there's certain things, just like us, that if it tastes better, they're going to eat it too, and they'll adjust and move to different areas because there's a better food source. But all in all, they're not like choosing their core areas based on food for the most part. I mean, the most important thing, especially for mature bucks, is the cover and elevation aspect in the mountains. And like I said before, they'll go a mile to feed if they have to. They're more important. It's more important to them to live and see tomorrow and find that area that's going to make that happen than to fill their belly up that night. They'll figure out a way to do that. So.
Yeah, and then a lot of times when they go a mile away at night, they're leaving sign over there.
Yeah.
And you're getting pictures of them too, and you're like, to me again, if I'm getting nighttime, even though they're in the middle of the night, that tells me that I'm not right on top of a deer's core area, but I'm thinking he's probably living right around here somewhere, because why would he be here feeding in the middle of the night? But what you're saying is they don't really care. Those two don't necessarily correlate.
No, I mean, obviously it would be nice, I'm sure, that for any buck, they probably don't want to have to go a mile, but if they got to do it, they're going to do it. It's if they're seeing a lot of pressure, or there's a lot of activity of humans or predators around their feeding area in the daytime, that's probably going to push them back, to bed much further away. So no, I never, like I said before, I'm not out there like, oh, there's feed in here, this is where I'm going to hunt. Like anymore, it's like, all right, I got to find the cover, elevation, and look for sign, things like that. Like that's when I'm getting more glued on that stuff, because it's more consistent with daylight activity.
Yeah, I like that point, because I'm very guilty, and I have been guilty of just hunting the sign. I see the fresh rubs, the rub lines. You go in these open flats that are just covered in acorns, and they look beautiful. You can see 150, 200 yards, and you're like, oh man, this is a rut fest in here. And it's like, no, there was a freaking herd of bucks that came through here in the middle of the night and tore this place up, but they could be a mile away.
Absolutely.
So that's like, it's just little things like that you can pick up and learn. That's going to help me be more successful. And maybe like if, and to the point of like trying to help people that are trying to get out and scout for this upcoming season is, look for some of those areas that have more cover and maybe are at a little bit higher of elevation, because you're going to be better off getting in there and hunting closer to some of those bedding areas than in those areas that are wide open and they may have a lot of food, but they're not on their feet feeding all day long. They're staying closer to their bedding.
Absolutely.
So then you're using the next tool is the trail cameras to narrow down, verify actually what you're seeing.
Oh, definitely.
if you want to talk.
Yep. No, I'll bring that up. Like, I mean, I probably talk like I'm a mainly boots on the ground type of scouter, but I learn more off my cameras than anything, and I've learned that I don't think there's a number or a saying where you can have too many of them. Like, even if you only owned like 20 acres and you had 50 cameras on it, you'd probably be amazed how much you learned about your area just through those cameras. You can do all the walking you want and find sign, but it's hard to always like pattern deer and pick up on things when you're spooking them too. When you can just throw a camera on a tree, on a trail, or on a scrape, and get the intel, and the deer aren't even bothered, and they're acting normal and like nothing's harming them. That's when you're getting information that is going to help you as a hunter. Not so much where, oh, here, maybe somebody kicked a buck by you and you're thinking, oh, well, here's the spot because I saw him. No, somebody just bumped him to you, and you're just catching him running for his life. So cameras, they're not so much for me like, hey, I'm getting this buck on camera and now I'm going to move in and hunt that spot. Like, I will do that, but I throw cameras out to learn about an area and how deer are using that area, where they at in the day, where they at in the night, your food sources, you just, the cameras are basically like your eyes in the woods 24/7. And even though I don't know if we said it, but I'm probably going to run like a good 100 or more this year.
Wow.
But it's not like I got a one camera every mile. Like, a lot of them they're in clusters. I'll have like 8, 10 areas and maybe like 10 cameras per area spread out, in a half square mile or something like that. And I'm counting on those clusters of cameras to try to narrow down what the deer are doing.
So what's your strategy with those cameras? So, and what I mean by that is, so during the summer and leading up to the season, are you putting cameras in spots where you're leaving them like consistently? Like, this is a spot that I keep a camera all the time. Do you have, are you on trails? Are you on scrapes? Are you on beds? Like, what's your trail camera
Sure.
game
Almost
plan?
every camera I have is on a scrape, and it's not always a real scrape. A lot of them are just mock scrapes. And the only reason, probably just the main reason why I put them on a scrape, is I want to get them to stop and just, I'd like a decent picture to, sometimes you just get a blur of a deer walking by on a trail and you're not even sure what buck it might be. But if I can get them to stop, and even pose a few different angles, like, it's just, the scrape creates a much better picture. But another thing that I like about a scrape is it's like a social hub where we might all go, to a restaurant. Well, we used to be able to go to restaurants, but but we might all go to a restaurant and have a drink and have dinner or whatever. But that's kind of like the spot where deer, there might not be meeting face to face, but it's kind of to see like, hey, I've been here, just so you know, and that social hub. So that's what's great about scrapes, is you can really get to know the deer, in your particular area. So yeah, almost all my cameras are on scrapes, just for those two reasons. I don't think a scrape is like maybe the best spot always in the woods, or do you always have to just set up on scrapes? No, I don't like to set up on beds. I know that. I've set up on beds, and it just seems like sometimes, if not more, the bucks seem to be a little bit more bothered by them. If I'm going to set up around bedding, I'll set up on trails or something coming in and out of the bedding. I feel a lot more comfortable that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's just, I'm just looking for a place to get the deer to stop and to really let me know what deer it is. So the scrape is gonna probably be as good of a spot as any, just so I can get that right picture.
Yeah, couple things on that. So on your scrape setup, so you showed us a few. I think there was only a couple that were natural scrapes that we walked by. And so, what are you doing for your mock scrapes that you're creating? And what are you doing for scent? Because I thought that was an interesting discussion we had.
Sure.
Your theory on that and what you're doing there.
Sure. Well, a lot of my mock scrapes you saw are artificial, like rope or, I've used anything that looks like a branch. I've used. I don't know if it really makes that much of a difference. But why I like artificial is, say, when you make a mock scrape and you snap that branch and it's already kind of broken in half. Well, once the deer are tugging on it for a month, sometimes less, they just snap it off. And without that branch, that scrape means nothing. Like they're not going to the ground and smelling, that's Joe Smith who just pissed right there. They're not going by that. They're going by the preorbital scent that they put on the licking branch. And do I know for sure that they can determine each deer? Does every deer have its own preorbital scent? I'm not quite sure about that, but I've learned that that's the most important scent and aspect of the scrape is that licking branch. So there's got to be something with the preorbital scent that's making a big difference. And I like to get my scrapes. I mean, I pretty much, I hope my scrapes are even year round. Like if I hang rope there, I don't take the rope down after the season. I'll leave it up there the whole time. And I want that scrape to just be like anything else in that deer's home. I just want it to think that it's theirs and it's their spot to continue to check out with other deer. And as far as scent goes, I use absolutely zero scent. Actually, I've had a couple of companies send me scent, and I just threw it away. I was probably a little too nice and said sure, but I didn't want to talk down on their product and say, well, scent doesn't work, because I know there's people that really believe in scent, and I'm not saying it doesn't work at all, but what I like most about not putting anything on those scrapes and licking branches is all my scent is 100% natural. Like if there's a deer working that scrape almost every day, then that's just 100% naturally done by deer, and I'm not messing with it at all. I'm not putting anything artificial. It's just a natural spot, and I've used scents in the past, and honestly, I think, I can almost prove that if you do it this way, you're going to have even better results, especially with mature bucks. And there's some bucks that don't put up with anything. Something doesn't smell right or look right, they're gone. They don't mess with it. So I've just learned that if you just kind of let the deer do their thing, that you're going to have just as good, if not better, results.
Yeah, and those scrapes are so important. I mean, I have a spot that's my favorite spot up at our camp. That it was the biggest scrape in the area, and it was a huge community scrape with a great big grapevine that came down, and we had a bad windstorm a few years ago, and it brought a tree down and it knocked that vine down. There hasn't been a scrape there since. I've tried creating a mock scrape, but just that licking branch, they would work that thing, and it was big and swing around. I'm sure that they loved that, bouncing that thing around on their heads, but that licking branch is so important. And, if you're somebody who's thinking about, getting out there and creating a couple mock scrapes, right now is a great time to do that.
Absolutely.
And, I had asked your opinion on that, and really, between now and sounded like the end of July, beginning of August, and then you don't want to be out there messing around with that stuff once you get into, August and towards September. You just don't want to be in there leaving your scent and doing those sort of things. So, do that stuff in the next couple months if you're going to, and you just kick all the leaves and debris away with your foot just to make a visual to get them to come over there. And then as soon as you get that first interaction on that scrape, now that's a scrape, and deer are going to come to that, smell other deer, and hopefully it becomes an active sign point where they're all coming to. So
yeah, and let me also bring up that, like, when I was shed hunting last spring or even or late winter, I was probably carrying like 10, 15 foot of rope with me, and whenever I'd come to certain spots where I wanted to make a mock scrape, like I was making my mock scrapes even in December. Like people think, well, that's way too early to make a mock scrape, but if you use rope and you tie it like up on a good thick branch, I'm telling you, they're not going to take it down. And the longer that rope sits there, and the more time you give deer to get used to it and interact with it, the better the results are going to be. Like you would think most people would say, well, I'm going to, it's 2 weeks before the season or a week before, I'm going to go make some mock scrapes. But actually, that's probably like the absolute worst time. You want to get those scrapes going to a point where it's a year-round interaction, and they just become natural to their environment.
Yeah. You had two I think two of the scrapes you showed us had kind of a larger like braided rope, and you had knots tied in it. Was that for a purpose, or was that just because there was knots in the rope?
I'm always like trying different things just to see if like I have one. I really never tell anyone this, but one of my favorite ones is I have a thick rope with a bunch of other pieces tied off on the side of it. Because when a deer works a licking branch, they're not as much getting under it, but I swear they like it when there's something sticking off the side of it that they can kind of just rub their head on. And I swear that's probably been the best or my favorite one. It just seems like it gets more activity. And it's got like 6 little pieces of other rope sticking off the sides. And I just think it probably holds a lot more scent that way too. But that might be my favorite way. And I can't say that I've really figured out what's the ultimate licking branch, but just from my experience, you're better off with artificial than just breaking a branch, because the branch will work great until they rip it down. And if you're not checking your maybe that camera or that spot, if you're not there all the time, then who knows, you might have a month or two with that scrape getting no activity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a key point, is both with the number of cameras that you're running, but also just being in the big woods, and it's not easy to get to your cameras. And of course, everybody doesn't just want to check their cameras all the time anyways. But you're trying to make your setups as bulletproof as possible.
absolutely.
So I noticed on your camera setups too, it didn't seem like you're going too far out of your way to hide your cameras. They kind of were just at like 3 foot off the ground, strapped to a tree, kind of right in front of a scrape. So do you notice a lot of obviously I'm thinking you don't notice deer being disturbed a whole lot with your cameras?
No, because one of the main things, like I keep saying, is I get my cameras out there way earlier than most people. And it really is. I think the first couple checks aren't always as good sometimes, because there's probably some deer that are a little bit unsure what's going on. But if if you get a camera out now, I don't even care if you stick it on top of a scrape and the deer is almost bumping up against it. After a while, most deer will just get used to it. It's that first experience or 2 or 3, they're like, why is that there? What's that? But after a while, you give them time, just like how they say with your tree stands or anything, they just start to get used to it. So no, I'm not just throwing them out there this time of year and earlier to see what's there. I'm keeping them out there because I just want that to look as natural as possible. And it doesn't mean, you can throw them way high up in a tree, and it probably does make a difference, especially if you're on a tighter schedule and you don't have as much time to get them all out there soaking well in advance. But no matter what, deer could still pick up on that. So you're better off to just get them out there as soon as possible and let them get used to it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I've never really heard that before. And what about flash? What kind of flashes are you using at that close range?
I prefer no flash, like, the no flash cameras or infrared, but I still have some that are actually the old camera flash that I'm telling you, as long as you give the deer time to get used to them, it really doesn't matter. I have classic examples of, you see a buck the first time and his eyes are as big as baseballs, and he doesn't come back for 2 weeks, but then 3-4 weeks later, there he is, and then all of a sudden he's coming back. He's like, all right, I guess that didn't hurt, or it's okay. And they just, it's all about just letting them get used to it. You could do, you could say, like, have a food plot, or you say you throw a ground blind out in your food plot, and all of a sudden, and I'm sure the deer, that takes time to adjust to something like that too. They're very weary and curious creatures, so they've learned that if something doesn't look right, to back off. But then after a while, they accept it. So like I said, you can't put your cameras out too soon. There's no reason why that can be a problem. The sooner you get all your gear out, your cameras, the better it's going to be.
Yeah. And on, if there's a lot of talk about mounting the cameras up higher on trees, both for, keeping it out of the deer's eyesight, but also, maybe less theft of cameras if you're
Mhm.
hunting public land. But I think one of the downfalls, and I've seen it personally, is if you don't have that thing angled just right
Yep.
down wherever the deer are coming from, if you think about that, if it's down at ground level, if you're 3-4 feet off the ground, your sensor is reaching directly out for a distance, like, most likely. When you're up in a tree like that coming down at an angle, if you aren't just at the right angle or that deer's moving just a little too fast, you're not getting that on camera. And I haven't, I've had, it's not that I'm not getting pictures with them elevated in the tree, but you're going to get less pictures and potentially miss more game if they are up high like that. So that's just something I've experienced. I like the idea of putting them up higher for some reasons, but then there's the downfall of you might be missing more than what you would if they were down a little bit lower.
Well, I can tell you, I found some of my biggest bucks that I know I wouldn't have been able to find on an elevated camera. Like, I'll get a picture of a deer kind of like maybe right up working the scraper, but then I look in the background like 15 yards or back further and I'll see a giant buck. You're not going to get that if you're facing the ground. So, especially when there's groups of deer, and even this time of year, if you're just trying to get inventory, you're really probably hurting yourself more by just focusing on one tiny spot when you're missing all that background. So there's definitely disadvantages of putting them up high.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I guess the last thing I want to hit on with trail cameras was back to, that you're not putting them right on top of beds, but you are putting cameras. A lot of times, if you identify where a buck is bedding, you're putting multiple cameras, hitting each one of those entrance and exit points from the bedding area. That got my mind turning on a few different spots that I hunt, just thinking about that and taking that inventory. So if you set spots like that up, I think that big 12 pointer that you're after, that bed you showed us is one of those where you're doing that. How often are you going in there to check that camera? Are you, or that series of cameras around there? Are you trying to stay out, or are you using cell cams, or what are you doing in situations like that?
Well, just for the expense reason, like most bucks that I'm doing that, I can't afford to, run 10 cameras, cell cameras that are $200, $300, $400 a piece. Or so most of the time I just can't do that. So what I'll usually do is I'll have like 3 or 4 cameras on entry and exit routes around the beds, but then I'll have another perimeter of cameras, maybe 200-300 yards back more, and I might check those like once a week, different, especially more in the hunting season if I'm trying to dial in on a pattern. So I'll check the ones back more often. But then if one camera showing me something where I feel that, all right, now is the time that I need to check that one close to his bed because it seems like he's coming from that direction, then I'll check those ones more often. But the ones right on top of beds, probably around every 2 weeks. Okay. And when I say on top, I'm still like 80 to 100 yards away. So it's not like I'm really that close. But yeah, I mainly, it's almost like picturing like a baseball defense setup. Like you got like your third base, shortstop, second base, first base. Like I might have a cluster of cameras there, but then I'm checking the ones like in the outfield more often. And then if I see something from one direction or the other, then I'll go in and check the closer ones.
That's a great image. You're good with that stuff. Because that's a perfect analogy. It really is. You're trying to kind of broadcast it out and get that wide net. And then once you get a hit over here, then you're going to bring it in. So
like not to interrupt you, but last year on that 12 point, I think I had 9 cameras kind of in somewhat of that kind of pattern. And I'm not saying it has to look just like a baseball.
Yeah. Where do you put the pitcher? Yeah.
Talk about the shift, Steve.
It's a pull hitter. What's the situation?
But anyways, I guess last year then you'd say right field for that 12 point was that, and first base was like his hot spot. And that's how I eventually, moved in on him. Center field and left field and all that, there was nothing. It just completely died off. And even though left field and third base was like 200 to 300 yards from his bed. Literally, he was not like 90% of the activity was just in one small area. And like that's when those cluster cameras really start to teach you something. Is you might think, well, this buck's gone, he's not around, and no, that's not the case at all. It's just he's, especially when they go into that phase like early October when they're really not moving much, they're just kind of hanging tight. That's when that setup really pays off, because you can just have one or two cameras in a spot, and like I said, it looks like he's not there at all. But then if you start running 9, 10 of them in like a 500-yard square area, you'll be amazed at the difference of what you get if they're spread out right.
It's great. It's good stuff to think about, and definitely thought provoking on our end. I know we have 4 more Cuddy Link cameras that should be showing up today. So we're gonna, on our 100 acres or whatever it is of woods that we've got on the farm that Dallas and I are hunting together with the family. I mean, we're gonna hopefully be able to cover that area pretty good on a couple of the bucks that we're targeting. So
yeah, and then like the nice thing about the cutty backs is you don't need cell signal. You might have it anyway, but you can still, if you have, if one doesn't have a good cell signal, it's linking them all together anyways, and you only really have to check one camera in some situations. So I think you guys are definitely onto something.
Yeah, we're fired up about it. You got anything else that we didn't hit on the scouting side of things, or trail cameras or anything like that, Dallas?
No, I just I think you and I, Billy, we're trying to shift our focus more towards buck bedding, and then trying to work back. Not to say we're going to be hunting on top of the beds or anything, but we're just trying to work back to, I think, work backwards from the bed out and try to get an idea of what a buck's doing there. And I think that's, from what I gather, I think that's kind of your strategy too, Steve. Start by finding those beds and then figure out what he's doing from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be honest, I've said it many times. There's some bucks I can't seem to narrow down the bedding, but I'm close. And it's just because I see what I'm getting on my cameras. And there's probably a lot of people that get frustrated, like they've got pictures of a certain buck and they can't really pinpoint the bedding. But with those cluster cameras, 1 or 2 of them you're getting in the daylight. That's really all you can ask for. As long as you're getting daylight pictures, and and then as long as you're not right on top of the bed, you're fine. You don't always have to know exactly where he beds. It helps, but some of these
Just
bucks
the
go
core
around a lot too. Like in a 200-300 yard stretch, he might have 10 or 15 beds. So the main thing, like I said, is to try to back off a good couple hundred yards, and then if the wind's swirling, I think there's a lot better chance that I wrote a little article on my page the other day about how I think our scent molecules are kind of like shooting a shotgun. Like up close, I think you got a tighter, stronger pattern, but I think you get 200-300 yards away, and I think your scent is scattering, and it's probably not as potent then either. So it's just about finding that right in between of, I'm hunting around bedding, I'm not hunting too far, but I'm not hunting too close. You just got to learn to find those kind of spots.
Yep. Is there anything else you guys got?
Well, something else Steve just mentioned there was his post. I follow your Facebook page, but I do like what you do on social media, as far as you kind of have I don't know what you would call it, like a long form post where you might pick a topic that struck you for whatever reason.
Yep.
You heard something or you saw something, and you might just write like a couple hundred words about it. And I've been reading those, and I think that I've actually gotten, I could kind of see your perspective on some things, but they're pretty thought provoking, I think.
Good. No, I get like tons of people saying that that's probably like the only reason they follow me, because they love to see those little articles. And anytime there's like you said, it comes to my mind, and I want to share with people. Like being a guide, you have to be like a sharing hunter, and I'm not just sharing like my skills or my time in the woods to help someone, like almost physically help them get a deer. Like I also have the desire to share my knowledge in ways like guys like you or anyone else, through an article. I want everyone to have success, and that we might be getting off topic, but I truly think that there's a lot of people out there that hate to see other hunters have success. And I'm the complete opposite, because if we don't have hunters, happy hunters really having success, you might as well kiss our sport goodbye. We all got to be having fun, killing deer, whatever, just having a great time in the woods. We want to see everyone with a smile on their face, or else what we truly love someday won't be here. So we're all just one big team. And when your buddy kills one, that's just like not much different than you killing it. We just got to support each other. That's pretty much the way I feel. And that's what I'm out here to do.
Yeah, we're right there with you. That we feel exactly the same way. And, I think that's something that, especially when you hunt in a group where you have that hunting camp atmosphere, we talked about that, the three of us together, is it didn't matter if you got one that day or not. You come back to camp and somebody shot a doe, it's a celebration. You're fired up for everybody. And, that's where if you haven't had a hunting camp, or you haven't had that experience with that core group of people that you hunt with, let's be honest, with social media, it's very easy to go down that trail of being jealous that so-and-so shot this, or, oh, he must have done something illegal. And it's like, let's all understand that we all do need to be on the same boat. There are always somebody that's trying to poke a hole in it. And as a group, we have to, keep an eye on those folks and police them and hold them accountable. But, there's the overwhelming majority, and I guess this can be said for a lot of what's going on in our world right now. The overwhelming majority of people are good people, and we got to take care of each other, respect each other, respect what we do, and, keep the other people in line that are not doing things for the greater good. So
that's a great point. I'm glad we brought that up.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I guess kind of in closing here, I know your son's got a haircut, and I'm sure there's some diapers upstairs that are full of poop that I got to take care of. But, I definitely encourage everybody to check Steve out. As soon as I started following you, I instantly was super intrigued with what you're up to and what you're doing. And not only are you're on to great deer, but you're sharing a lot of knowledge. You're very inviting. You're very relatable. And that's something that I think a lot of us yearn for, is somebody that is close to home, has a lot of knowledge. You spend a ton of time in the woods. You are very open to share. And obviously we know now how much you are willing to share and to educate. So, we appreciate what you're doing. Keep up the good work. I hope we can help get some people to tune into you and maybe even look to you for some guiding here, whether it be scouting trips like we did, or even something coming up in the fall. So I guess give you the opportunity real quick to kind of, plug that. And, do you have openings this fall? Do you have, how does that work with you? I don't really know. We talked too much about that when we were together.
No, and I will bring this up. I do have some openings. I'm probably 70% full right now. I have some good openings though, like second, third week in November for archery. Gun season's just about wrapped up. But what I do want to bring up to anyone that's listening is I'm not going to go down the political route of what's right or wrong here, but I don't know if we're going to be able to do meals and lodging for everyone, or I'm not sure what the future holds this year, but I'm definitely going to be guiding people, whether they got to stay in cabins or hotels or whatever. I mean, there's no doubt I'm not going to let that stop. So we're going to be taking people this year, still going to try to fill up these spots. And if you're interested in still booking a hunt with us, you can find me on social media at Sherks Guide Service, or you can get on my website, sherksguideservice.com. And like I said, for archery, we still have a good amount of openings second and third week in November, which traditionally really good weeks. So, I encourage everyone, despite all that we're going through, and I don't say this as a business point, but let's not put hunting aside, the things that we love. Let's all still go out there and make this 2020 hunting season the best one we ever had. And then from there on, let's just keep it going. So.
I'm all fired up, man. You make me. I got weapons behind me. I'm ready to go out and start shooting right now. Yeah, that's awesome. So thank you, Steve, and we'll stay in touch, I'm sure. And I think Dallas might be trying to link up with you come August when he comes down there to do some scouting again when he's down in the park,
Sure.
doing a little family vacation. And so we'll link back up again and get you on here when we get closer to season and have you tell everybody how to shoot that big buck.
Sounds great to me, guys. It was
All
a
right.
pleasure having me.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Steve.
it.
All right.
See ya.
See ya.
Thanks, boys. Have a good day. I'm about to piss my pants over here. I gotta go to the bathroom. Something terrible. See ya. Thank you.
We'll see ya. Bye-bye.
Hey, Steve.
Thank you all so much for listening to this podcast. We greatly appreciate you tagging along. After all, this is we don't do this just to hear ourselves talk, even though probably there's people that think I do that. So I guess that is probably a factor. But we do this because we like to share our stories and share our experiences and introduce cool people to you. So if there's anything we can do to bring you some content that you'd like personally, just reach directly out to us and let us know. We would be happy to bring you whatever content you would like to a certain extent. You know, that's a loaded statement. So if you'd like to hear something, let me know, and we'll see if we can get it on the books and get an episode out about it. So that's that. If you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is through our now we've got some merch that will be going up on the website. So that's one way you can help support the podcast. Starting out, we'll probably just have the stickers and hats, but we'll be adding more stuff down the line, I would expect. But the other way is to shop through some of the affiliate codes that we have with some companies that I know we all use here at Pertnear Outdoors, and my friends and family all use these brands in these stores. And it's a great way to support our podcast and our platform by shopping in places you already shop at. So easiest way to do that is to go to the link that's in both our Instagram and our Facebook profiles. That is called a link tree. If you scroll through that link tree, you'll see a couple different stores in there that'll look familiar. Camo Fire is one that they do. If you don't know what Camo Fire is, they do daily deals on hunting and outdoor gear. So great way to save money on some of the name brand products that you use and trust. Another one that we've got a affiliate program through is Sitka Gear. So anything you buy directly through Sitka's website through our link helps support us. Cabela's is a big one. That's one that we all use. My nickname, if anybody doesn't know, is Cabela's because I seem to have everything. Or if I don't, I go shopping at Cabela's to get it. So if you use that link, anything you purchase from Cabela's, we would get a little piece of that action. Same thing for Black Ovis is probably the other biggie that everybody uses out there. So check those out. That's very easy. All you do is just click on those links, and once you're shopping on those web pages, anything that you buy, we will get a little piece of that action. So thanks again for your support. We are, like I said, doing this for you, and that's all I got to say. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate what y'all do out there. Keep feeding them. Have a good week.